Hello YouTube, my name is Valerie, and this is part 2 of the books that I've read recently that I haven't had a chance to talk about because I haven't been making videos. So here we go. The next book that I want to talk about is The Monogram Murders by Sophie Hannah. So this book came out, I want to say a couple years ago, and it is a book that was not written by Agatha Christie, but is a new Hercule Poirot detective novel. And when I heard that it was coming out, I was so torn because I was like in equal parts thrilled and horrified because Agatha Christie, as you can tell, is one of my favorite authors. All of those books are Agatha Christie, and all the way up to there is Agatha Christie. So I really like Agatha Christie. And I was just really worried about Sophie Hannah just ruining Hercule Poirot, and how could they let someone else other than Agatha Christie write an Hercule Poirot book. But I also was really curious because the Hercule Poirot books tend to be my favorites. So I decided to break down and read it, and I actually listened to the audiobook version, which was fun. And overall, I really enjoyed it. The one thing I will say about it that I did not care for was that I thought the ending was a bit of a letdown. I was a bit disappointed in the ending, which if you've read an Agatha Christie, you know that like the ending is one of the best parts typically of an Agatha Christie book, the reveal of who did it, and it was a bit of a letdown. But the process of reading the book was very enjoyable. I really enjoyed listening to it on audiobook. So if you like Agatha Christie, I would give this one a shot. It's not Agatha Christie, but it was pretty fun to read. So despite the ending being a little weird, I still would recommend it. So the next book I want to talk about, which I also have a copy of, is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. And I really enjoyed this book. I read The Remains of the Day earlier this year and loved it. And so I decided that I wanted to read more by Ishiguro. So I heard that this one was good, so I decided to read it next. And I ended up reading it actually as a buddy read with Joyce from Jumble of Jargon, who is awesome. And we had an interesting conversation about this book when we finished because there was a lot to discuss. So I don't want to give away too much about this book is the thing, because I went into it not really knowing anything about it aside from the fact that it takes place at a boarding school. And that was pretty much all I knew. So I will say that as the book goes on, at least like the first 100 pages or so, the book kind of drops all of these little clues that maybe not everything is as it seems at this boarding school and that there's something strange going on. And then eventually it kind of all comes together and you realize what's going on. But I don't want to tell you because that's part of the fun of this book is the reveal of what the mystery is. But I will say that I highly recommend this book. It was really interesting, and I think it made me think a lot about like humanity and ethics and how difficult it can sometimes be for society to break out of the structures that it settles into, even when those structures are unjust. So yeah, it was very interesting and I highly recommend it. Yeah, I really don't want to say too much because of spoilers. I actually ended up watching the movie version of this book, which I had no idea that there was a movie version, with a really great cast. The cast was Carey Mulligan, who I mainly know as Sally Sparrow from Blink, from Doctor Who. So Carey Mulligan played the main character, and then Keira Knightley and Andrew Garfield. And they were all really good in the movie version. So I would recommend the book first. I definitely liked the book over the movie. I thought that the movie went way too quickly into what was actually happening. Like you find out pretty quick what the mystery is in the movie. And I liked how in the book it was kind of left up in the air for a while to where you didn't really know exactly what was going on. So if you like dystopians, I would recommend this. So the next book that I want to talk about is From June with Death by Ruth Rendell. So, I have known about Ruth Rendell books for a long time. She always kind of comes up on lists of like books that people who read Agatha Christie books might like. But I think I had always had this impression of her as being a little more scary, like of her books being a little more creepy and scary than Agatha Christie books typically are. So I was a bit hesitant to read one, but I finally got around to it and read From June with Death, and I thought it was pretty good. I liked it. I think I would definitely be open to reading more books by Ruth Rendell. It's a pretty straightforward, typical kind of Agatha Christie style mystery. I will say it was a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? A little less cozy. I felt like some of the things that were happening in the book might have been scandalous, in an Agatha Christie book. But she just kind of was like, was whatever. And then the main reason that I thought this book was so interesting, I can't say because it involves the end of the book. So I would just say that if you like mysteries, I would recommend this book. I thought that it was a little ahead of its time. I think it was from the 60s. And yeah, I rather enjoyed it. So I'm definitely open to reading more books by Ruth Rendell in the future. And the last book that I am going to talk about is Still Life by Louise Penny. This is way up there as one of my favorite books I've read recently. I just finished this yesterday and I loved it. I have a hard time finding mystery books that I like really like, because like when I say cozy, people think I mean like there's like a very formulaic kind of cozy that exists right now, and has for maybe 10 or 20 years. And it's like, and there's nothing wrong with those books, but that's just not what I'm looking for, because they're like very formulaic. There's typically a woman detective or a woman who owns her own business and does this detecting on the side by accident. And she's kind of quirky, and there's a romance subplot, and yeah, and it's just very, I don't know, it's just not what I'm looking for. So when I tell people that that's not what I'm looking for, they immediately go to the other end of the spectrum, and they're like, oh, you want like graphically violent books? I'm like, no, I want a happy medium. So Agatha Christie is one. Alan Bradley's books. I really liked the Last Policeman trilogy by Ben H. Winters. Jacqueline Winspear is pretty good too. I've only read the one book by her. But I really have a hard time finding books in that happy medium. Like Tana French was like borderline too far on the violent end for me. This book was right exactly in the spectrum of what I want to read in terms of mysteries. So this is the first in a series, and it's about, the inspector is named, I'm learning French, but I'm not great at pronunciation yet, Armand Gamache. Probably horribly butchering that. Takes place in Canada, in Quebec, actually, which is why the inspector's name is French. And the back even describes him as a 21st century version of Hercule Poirot. And I would agree with that. Like, he's not Hercule Poirot, but I did really like him. And it was such an interesting book. Despite the fact that I guessed who the murderer was, which I was really proud of, but despite that, I still really enjoyed reading the book. Typically when I guess who the murderer is, I'm like, oh, well, that was easy, they gave it away, it wasn't that hard to figure out. Like, that's part of the fun, is like being fooled. But I really didn't mind that I figured out who the murderer was, because I enjoyed reading the book so much. And I thought that the characters were all really interesting and rich. I felt one thing that was really kind of unique about the book is that whenever she was describing a scene, sometimes there would be a moment where she would briefly show you the characters, like one of the characters' thoughts, and like tell you kind of their thought process and what they were thinking. and and how it contrasted sometimes with what they were saying. And I felt like a lot of the book focused on like people trying and failing to be vulnerable with each other, and I thought that was a really interesting direction to go in with a mystery novel. So I even if you don't typically like mysteries, I really would recommend this book. And I'm so excited because there's 11 other books in this series and she's still writing them. So I have plenty of books to catch up on now. Again, not that I need any more books to read because I have way too many. I have way too many. So that's all I have for today. Those are kind of my favorite books that I've read this year, really. Let me know what books you've been reading recently that you really enjoyed. I would love to hear about them. Again, not that I need any more books to read because I have too many, but that's okay. That's, what we book lovers do. We just accumulate more and more books that we want to read. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day.